Hey there, have you ever looked around and noticed how some people just seem totally immune to hype? You know, a new trend is sweeping the globe and they're just off doing their own thing, completely unfazed? Well, today we're going to dive into the fascinating psychology behind what makes someone resistant to trends.
It's a really interesting question, right? What is it that makes one person camp out all night for the latest smartphone while someone else doesn't even know it's coming out? And you know what? It's not just about taste. It goes way, way deeper, right into how we're psychologically wired.
I bet you can picture someone like this in your head right now. They're not behind the times. They're just on their own time. They've got this quiet confidence that doesn't need the newest thing, the latest fad, or the most popular gadget to feel whole.
And look, this is so important to get. This isn't about being a rebel just for the sake of it. It's not some performative act of going against the grain. It's actually the natural result of a very specific psychological makeup. So let's unpack that, shall we?
Okay, so the first piece of this whole puzzle is something we can think of as an internal compass. This is the core guidance system for people who just don't get swept up by trends.
And this right here is the absolute key. It's called internal validation. All it means is that your sense of self-worth, it's not up for grabs. It doesn't rise and fall with likes or comments or what other people think. It comes from inside you. This chart just spells it out perfectly. Having an internal compass gives you a fixed direction, It's based on your values. But on the other hand, someone who relies on what other people think or external validation is more like a weather vane. They're just shifting and spinning with every little social wind. Their choices, and sometimes even how they feel about themselves, can totally change depending on what the crowd is doing.
I love this quote because it just hits the nail on the head. If your validation comes from other people, you're basically just borrowing your confidence. But people who have that strong internal compass, they own their self-worth. And because of that, they're just way less likely to go searching for it in some fleeting trend.
All right, so that's the first piece. But it's not just about how you feel about yourself, right? It's also about how you actually process and analyze the world around you.
And that brings us to this idea called cognitive independence. It's basically the skill of looking at a popular idea, a big trend, or something everyone believes, and being able to step back and evaluate it on its own merits, separate from its popularity. It's about thinking through an idea, not just repeating what you've heard. You can really see the massive difference here. On one side, you've got groupthink, where keeping everyone happy becomes more important than being right. Cognitive independence is pretty much the antidote to that. It puts truth over agreement and really values your own personal analysis more than just blending in with the group.
So what's the real-world effect of all this? Well, it can literally cut the feeling of social pressure in half. When you actually trust your own analysis, that intense need to fit in just loses so much of its power. You simply don't feel that same urgent pull to jump on the bandwagon.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. When you put these two powerful traits together, that internal compass for self-worth and the ability to think for yourself, you get a psychological profile that some call the sovereign mind. So let's connect the dots. You start with that internal compass, right? That gives you a stable sense of who you are, so you're not looking for trends to define you. Then you add cognitive independence, which gives you the tools to look at those trends objectively. And what do you get? A mind that is truly its own boss, directing its own course. At the end of the day, someone with a sovereign mind isn't asking what's popular or what's everyone else doing. They're asking a totally different question. Is this valuable to me? They feel less pressure, they know themselves incredibly well, and their choices are rooted in their own principles, not in some popularity contest. And that is probably the single biggest takeaway from all of this. Ignoring a trend isn't some big act of defiance. It's just what happens when your own internal world is more interesting, more compelling, and more stable than the one outside. It's this quiet, confident byproduct of truly knowing who you are. So I want to leave you with a question to think about. When you make choices, what's guiding you? Is it that steady internal compass pointing you toward your own true north? Or do you sometimes find yourself spinning like a weather vane, just moving with the ever-changing winds of the crowd? It's a fascinating thing to consider. Thanks for tuning in.